So maybe this was a softball question to get us warmed up here. We have some others that I want to merge into. Oof. Do you see what I did there?
I see what you did there.
So that way we can provide some hopefully valuable insights at some point. Welcome back to Reason Together, the podcast for Christians who think about stuff. This is a little bit of a different episode. I'm not here with Daniel, my usual co-host and co-founder of this podcast. I'm here with someone else, someone you know from past episode, way back when we had the Take the Coffee podcast guys on here. I have none other than my good friend Ethan Ryan with me today. Pastor Fox had some last-minute prior engagements, so we're going to sit here across my kitchen table and have a conversation for this podcast. The audio might sound a little different. I hope that's okay with you, dear listener. We're in a little bit more of an open, echoey room, so hopefully my editors can do some magic there. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. But welcome again to another episode, and welcome to Ethan Ryan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. We get to be in person this time. I used to live a little bit farther from you, but now I think we're, 3 hours?
2.5.
2.5. Okay, 2.5 hours from each other. So we get to meet in person a little more frequently. I sent a list of questions earlier today that listeners have sent in to us. And I figured I would give you the privilege of kind of curating this episode and picking what you want to talk about with those.
So I have some very quick answers for most of them.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do.
So,
I could probably blow through all these in like 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, in classic Reason Together style, I may slow them down to a crawl and talk incessantly long about them. So where would you like to go first?
Do I know the person?
Oh, wait. Hold on. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I forgot a very important detail. You, in fact, are one of our patrons, aren't you?
I am. I just finally signed up.
Yes. You've been a listener, though, since the beginning?
Episode number
right?
1.
Episode number 1. Longtime listener, current patron, friend of the podcast. But you're not alone. There are other folks that support this podcast as well, to which I would like to take a moment to extend our thanks to the patrons that support us over at patreon.com/reasontogether. You guys help pay our editors and pay for our internet stuff that we do. We are very appreciative to all of you for that. If you are listening and you're not a patron and you'd like to become one, like Ethan or any of our other said patrons, you can do that at patreon.com/reasontogether, and you can become one of the elite and sign up at that level and get yourself a t-shirt and access to the bonus content that comes at the end of every episode that nobody else gets to listen to but you elite patrons. So you can pick that level there if you like. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get back to your question.
The first one you sent me was about aggressive driving.
Yes, that one is from one of our listeners, my brother-in-law, actually.
Which brother-in-law?
That's Omar.
Okay, I don't know Omar.
Okay, I thought you knew Omar.
Well, I know of Omar.
Okay.
I know Nathan and Matthew.
Okay.
I was really hoping it was somebody I knew personally because I was about to rip their face off.
Okay, there'll be no ripping of faces on Reason Together podcast.
I'll put the gloves back on for Omar.
The title, though, of this question is funny. It's Driving Like Jehu, which listeners in the know would be familiar with the Old Testament character Jehu. What did it say? He drove furiously?
Yeah.
In the chariot?
People could tell from a long way off it was him who was driving.
Yes, because he was driving furiously. That's actually been a running joke in our family that my wife's side of the family, namely Omar, I think, maybe my father-in-law, have brought up is when folks drive like Jehu. So I'll read the question, and then you can go ahead and jump on this one first. So the question is, aggressively driving like a Christian. Here in the Midwest, we are deep into road construction season, which leads me to ask what a Christian is to do. There are numerous signs showing that the right lane is closed ahead. Everyone has, I already know what you're thinking. Everyone has merged to the left lane and the line is long. Then suddenly there is that one car who flies ahead in the right lane until the very last second before darting into the left lane, cutting in line in front of 25 patient drivers. I think we can all agree the line-cutting driver is not a Christian, but moving on from him, my question is, I think he was being a little snarky there. My question is, what should the patient Christian driver at the head of the traffic in the left lane do? Should he let them merge or box them out? Perhaps the loving thing to do would be to lovingly slow down and let the pagan merge in. Or should he show his love to those in line behind him by blocking him out? Also, does the Bible teach us to fight for justice? What better way to fight for justice than to keep one foot on the gas and one on the brake, alternating between darting ahead and stopping suddenly in strategic maneuvers to prevent the infidel from committing his sin of cutting in the line? Do you let them merge or box them out? I have a prediction of what you're going to say, but go ahead and say it, and I'll let you know if I'm right.
I feel like the way Omar phrased this question is that he could take what I'm about to say. And that is, you're responsible for your own ignorance. If you are in the left lane in a line and the right lane is still open, that's your fault.
Oh, but he said it's closed.
It's closed, but not yet. So I have legal proof of this. So I live in a city full of engineers. We have traffic engineers, and Alabama Department of Transportation just released a graphic begging people to use both lanes all the way up until the point of closure and then zipper merge. You cause massive problems for the people behind you by moving over too early.
Really?
And backing up the left lane. Yeah, proven fact.
Okay.
And my dad also works in the county up in Delaware.
So they have actual traffic engineers that have figured out.
This is a science. This is a science problem.
Okay.
So by you getting into that left lane that is still open too early, you're actually a part of the problem. Therefore, the infidel in the right lane, regardless of his status of salvation, is the most intelligent person. He is doing what he is supposed to be doing. Now,
oh, so you flipped the script here.
Yeah, so he's doing what's right. So you're suffering the consequences of making poor decisions. Now, I will say, if you come over without a signal, I will block you 100%. If you have a turn signal on, though, I will let anybody in. If your turn signal's on, I'll let you in.
But you got to do the wave, too, though. You know the wave? When you're the guy merging in, you got to roll down the window, stick your hand out, and just kind of wave as you go in.
That would be like the good Southern thing to do.
Does that get you like bonus points?
Maybe.
Yeah.
It depends. I think a good Southern thing, yeah. And I'm like kind of mellowed. When I go back up north, though, it does change. I become more angry. Then it'll be more on them to like fit the car in or force their way over.
I see. So you've totally kind of made me rethink this. So the loving thing to do is really Omar's question. The loving thing to do is to wait until the last possible minute to merge.
Yeah. The loving thing to do is to fill up both those lanes and then alternate cars merging over.
Okay, so what if you've done that? You've waited until the last second to merge, and then comes this guy zipping up from like in the shoulder or from behind everybody. He just zips around and he wants to get in now. Is he still doing the right thing, or does moving into the shoulder now make him the infidel?
Moving to the shoulder is illegal. Then you've crossed the line. And then I hope a semi-truck puts you into that barrier.
This is getting violent.
Let me also say something that Thomas and Daniel's views are not mine, and mine are not theirs, and they have not approved everything that's about to come out of my mouth.
Okay, thank you for the disclaimer. I don't have to make it. I would probably, though, lean closer to what you're saying, just because I think we're a little more similar to each other. in that regard. As far as like aggressive driving, I'm a little more of an aggressive driver than some. But I think that's an interesting thought. I hadn't even considered that there's a science behind merging.
In a perfect world, you leave space in between cars, which we don't do. We want to pull up on their bumper. And in a perfect world, two lanes coming together shouldn't technically have to slow down with a zipper merge. Obviously, we don't live in said perfect world, and you get the slinky effect.
Okay.
And you get Omar sitting in the left lane for 35 minutes while people are zipping by him. So.
Okay. All right. So maybe this was a softball question to get us warmed up here. We have some others that I want to merge into. Oof. Do you see what I did there?
I see what you did there.
So that way we can provide some hopefully valuable insights at some point. So this one is from a listener. This is from Jacob, and he's provided us with a good bit of things here. And which, by the way, good on Jacob. He's like made a list of questions here.
Yeah.
That helps us out a lot. He says here, and I have some thoughts on this one. I heard a preacher say that when his kids were babies, he would pray over them to this effect. Lord, I pray that you protect my children, but if they are not going to turn out right and live wickedly, I pray that you take them now. Jacob says, now I have my thoughts on this, but I would like to hear yours as well. The man did say that one of his kids did die as an infant about a month or so after he prayed that prayer.
That was a toughie. That was tough.
Okay, so here are my thoughts on this. And to me, it didn't seem that tough. This seemed like a no-brainer to me.
Okay, when I say tough, I mean that one of his kids died.
That's definitely tough. Yeah, I wouldn't deny that. But as far as praying this kind of prayer, which is, I think, the thrust of Jacob's question, if you could pray for anything for your kids and believe that God can do anything, why not just pray that if my kid does turn out wickedly, that they repent and are restored? Mm-hmm. Would that not be just as much of a, for lack of a better word, miraculous event that God does in someone's life, my child's life? Why go right to praying that he dies? Mm-hmm. Why do that when you could instead pray, Lord, if my child lives wickedly, can you please see to it that he repents and is restored? And if not, Lord, give me the grace to bear some shame as a parent if my child does that. Because, none of us like the idea of living in shame at the choices of our children. Mm-hmm. But the Bible does speak in Proverbs about a child who is the shame of his mother. Right? A wise son, of course, is the joy or the gladness of his father. But I don't want to experience that kind of shame. And to me, this prayer comes across as kind of selfish. It's almost like, Lord, I don't want to bear the shame of having a kid who's wayward. So if they do this, just take them out. That seems like a foolhardy and selfish prayer to pray, when you could just as easily pray, Lord, restore my child if he goes wayward. Why jump right to death? Yeah. Why do that? So it seems unnecessary to me.
Yeah, and I would agree. That was my first initial thought. And I've been going through 1 Corinthians with my teenagers. Preach morning service, then we have Sunday school, and I'm doing the youth group currently and talking about judging each other. When is it okay to judge and when is it not okay to judge? And it's been a lot of fun, and I've really learned a lot through this as well. And when it comes to judgment, I think one of the reasons judging and Christians get so mixed up is how we judge. And I used the illustration. I was like, Christians are to be, police officers. I know some people probably just bristled at that statement, but the job of a good police officer is to exercise discernment and enforce a law that has already been established by the lawgiver. So somebody commits a murder. They say, hey, you have committed something wrong. We have proved that fact. We're arresting you for murder. But he doesn't get to pass the judgment that is the reward for that punishment. You go to a court for that, and there is a judge that then passes that judgment. Here in America, we have a judge and a jury. Before God, we have an ultimate perfect judge. And when it comes to judging other people, the scripture says to rebuke sin. So as a Christian, we're there and we are to exercise our discernment. This is right, this is wrong. But we never get to decide what that punishment is unless the Bible explicitly says it.
Well, then I don't think then it would be fair to say that we as Christians have the right of enforcement in every case.
Well, that's where in a police they're not supposed to enforce. It's more just like discernment of what's
I would describe it more like shepherding, right? So like even if we do have to issue a rebuke to somebody, even if you're not a pastor and you have to maybe straighten somebody out or correct something or address some sort of sin, handling it more like a shepherd, I think, is more the direction I would go with it. Though I'm sure at some point, I'm trying to figure out how we got here from the question.
Well, I'm working back.
Oh, so you're circling around. Okay.
Yeah, I'm circling back.
I figured I had to pause just to make sure that we're on the same page, that I'm not sure that we have always the right of enforcement as Christians. But I think shepherding, though, is more... or sharpening even.
And I agree. It's more the exercising of discernment between what's right and what's wrong. And, sometimes a police officer would pull you over for speeding and be like, you know what? Hey, you were in the wrong, letting you off with a warning. Here's your admonition.
Right.
But the passing of a punishment does not belong to us. And you see that all through Scripture.
Okay, I think I see your connection now.
And for me, this guy has taken the place of God, in that he has seen that there's wrong, and he is asking for a very specific punishment.
According to this question from Jacob, the guy hasn't even seen the wrong yet. Yeah. He's saying, Lord, if my kid ever sins against you and turns out wickedly, I'm essentially praying a preemptive, imprecatory prayer down on the head of my child when I could just as easily pray that he be restored.
And unfortunately, I can guarantee you his children are going to turn out wickedly. Because
you can guarantee it.
They're human.
Oh, sure.
They're going to be sinners. Yeah. They're going to be born in sin, as David says. So it's like, how bad does his wicked have to be? Before, like, what is his standard of like, all right, God, now is what I meant.
It almost seems like it delves into sort of like Jephthah's vow territory, where it seems like an impetuous thing to pray that wasn't thought through first. You know what I mean?
I have heard this statement before by somebody who I love dearly. An older pastor had made this statement. All of his kids are alive, by the way. But what made it so hard for me is this man had one of his kids die a month after he prayed this prayer.
Yeah, so I talked about this with my family the other night and asked them what they thought on it. And one of the things I ended up coming around to was, and maybe this is me being a little aggressive and snarky, is that, I wonder if maybe the Lord knows in his sovereignty that this man's kid was going to turn out just fine, but the Lord was sparing that kid from a father this impetuous and cruel. Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. I'm just presupposing. Yeah. But it seems almost like something like this is unnecessarily sensational to say. Mm. And my mind went first to like evangelist sayings. Yeah. Right? Which I realize there are good evangelists out there. I'm not making a blanket generalization of all evangelists. However, there's a reason why there are certain cliches that we know, like an evangelist story. Yeah. There's a reason that term exists. Because there's sensationalist things. There's a reason why some evangelists get repeatedly invited back to the same exciting conferences, every year, is because they have that exciting personality where they can't just say something like a normal person would say it. They have to say it in the most superlative, the most exceptional and sensational way possible, because they're just right on that knife edge of wild and crazy. Mm-hmm. To where it keeps people entertained. This sounds like the kind of thing you would hear a guy say from a pulpit who's just naturally sort of a sensationalistic kind of guy.
Exactly. And probably in my head, I had that exact same image of like a tent meeting type thing. Right. A lot of people saying amen. Like, you sent me this while I was driving, and I was looking at that. And I was like, that is absolutely terrible to say something like that. Yeah. And then in my mind, I've been reading a lot about psychology recently and like effects of things that we do on the human brain. And I was like, what do you do? Here's my question for you. And we can't answer this because we're distant from this. As a man who prays this prayer and one of his kids dies, is that helpful? Is that a coping mechanism for you? To be like, well, he was growing up to be wicked, therefore God took him.
Yeah.
Like, in my mind, my first thought was like, he was so afraid of losing a child, he had made up an excuse ahead of time. And that was just like something that came into my mind. Once again, it's not something I can say.
It can't prove it. I suppose it's possible, but we can't prove it.
I think it's a foolish prayer.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's in conflict with our theology that if we believe God can do anything, if we believe we have a big God, which is a popular type of preaching amongst evangelists, right? Yeah. That we have a big God who can do anything, then why pray that God kill your kid if your kid goes wayward? Pray God restore him if he goes wayward. That's just as easy to pray.
And it's like, what do we pray for ourselves? Like, God, show me mercy. God, forgive me.
Yeah, would this man pray the same thing for himself?
God kill me if I'm about to do something that's going to go against your will.
I don't know. Maybe he would pray that. I don't know. Anyway, there's let's see. Jacob has a couple others here, but I might want to save them. Do you want to hit number 3? Your call.
Let's hit number 3. I think for possibly some clarification, so that maybe you and Daniel can hit it more in depth, because I'm not sure what he means by that.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the phrase, you need to meet God halfway?
I'm not sure.
I think I need more. Jacob, if you're listening, send us an email and give us some examples of what context that is used in. Is that used in like a soteriological sense? Like when people say about salvation, you meet God halfway? Or are they saying it more in like a prayer for help kind of thing? I don't understand. So maybe some examples if you can give us those. This one's a good one. Jacob says, why do we sometimes think that something bad is going to happen when we are given a large financial gift?
Solomon.
One-word answers.
Because we've all read Ecclesiastes. No, it's whether we like it or not. Especially we have a very broad world philosophy of what goes around comes around, the idea of karma. Even Solomon speaks to that,
Well, I think even the secular world understands to some degree what wealth can do to a person. Hence the common phrase among the world. You know what it is? Mo money, mo problems. I can't believe I just said that on this podcast.
Someone had to say it.
But the world knows this. And I think, but see, the thing is, does it always mean that every Christian who maybe earns a lot of money and becomes wealthy is going to have problems? No, it doesn't. And I think maybe we can get almost superstitious about it at times, where we see a windfall happen and we immediately think, oh, something bad's going to happen. There might be a reason why the Lord doesn't want you wealthy.
Yeah.
Depending on who you are. Mm-hmm. I know some Christians who are wealthy, but you know what they also are? Generous.
Yeah.
They bless the Lord with their money. They bless their brethren with their money. They don't seem to have the kinds of problems we often associate with money. And I think many times if we always get in the habit of when we see money come, all of a sudden we have a problem and now we have to pay for it. Maybe the Lord is trying to tell us he can't trust us with large amounts of wealth.
Yes. And I think that's implied in the question. Because it's like something bad is going to happen after receiving a large financial gift, which implies that is a good thing.
Yeah.
And in the world's eyes, it's the love of money.
Yeah.
And when we view large financial gifts as this is good, then our view of losing that is like, okay, this is bad, or
sure.
something else
that
like
was
that.
Very astute.
Yeah, it's like just the basic human mindset of how do we measure good and bad is almost always, if you ask the world, a material possession of I'm doing good, therefore I have much finances. I'm poor, therefore I'm doing bad or something wrong.
Right.
And we see that in the government handouts and working with whatever they not homeless. They're unhomed, unhoused. I forget what they're calling them now.
A new politically correct term for
marginalized communities. They're like, some bad stuff is happening to us because we don't have money. And there's no hope for good things to happen to us. That's why crime is so high and all these other things. Because our whole basis and view of good and evil it corresponds directly to financial prosperity.
I see. Okay. All right. Moving on. I might throw one out here that is not on the list at all. So we're gonna go out of left field here.
Let's do it.
Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Aliens. Let me preface this for any listeners who might be living under a rock these days. If you've been listening to the news at all, there was recently a hearing. This is in Congress. There was a hearing that took place about the existence of, it used to be UFOs, right?
Yes.
Now what do they call them now? UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon?
Yeah, something like that.
And there are actual people that they're calling whistleblowers. They're government workers giving all sorts of testimony under oath, I think, about things that they've seen the government hiding in relation to aliens. And I have some thoughts on this. I wondered if this is something you've been following.
I follow this pretty closely, not because I'm super interested in the political aspect of the timing of these aliens that always seem to come around at certain times. But
I know
really, the entire concept of life outside of our Earth. And I just recommended to you a podcast with Stephen Meyer. And, he talks about aliens at the end because it was with Joe Rogan, so firm believer in aliens. And I live in Huntsville, Alabama, which is Rocket City. NASA has a large presence there. Yeah. And NASA's sole existence, the only reason NASA really exists is to find life. They can claim...
That's the sole reason?
That's really the sole reason NASA exists.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. They'll tell you, beat the Russians to the moon or whatever, but really they're looking for life. If you look at most of the advancements we've made in space technology with satellites and stuff, they're trying to prove the beginning of our universe and that there is life out there to be found. So I try to follow it pretty closely because from a Christian Bible-believing standpoint, it just keeps proving over and over that there is a God out there, there is intelligence out there. It's very interesting to me, but if we were just to take it from the Bible perspective, if there's other life out there, it is life without a soul.
Okay.
God sent Jesus.
That's fair.
God sent Jesus to die for us on this earth. We could get into the multiverse theory, which I did not know this. Now we're getting super scientific. That is
we should be careful because we're not scientists, right? Uh-oh.
We are highly esteemed philosophers by all accounts. If you say it with enough confidence, people will believe it.
I guess just act like it. Is this something you're learning with psychologists? Is be the philosopher.
Well,
be the philosopher.
Was it Hitler or Stalin? If you tell a lie loud enough and long enough, people will start to believe you. It was some terrible person who said that.
Wow.
So I'm not going to take that under advisement. But the multiverse theory, really, I just talked to you off air, evolution or Darwinian evolution, people have scientifically proven it cannot be true.
Yeah.
There is not enough time. There's like an actual measurement of time it takes for an action to occur that scientists have a name for.
I see.
There's not enough time in the world or the universe for it to have exist, like evolution
for things to turn out as they are right now.
Yeah, there's
right, and that's why many turn to the idea of a multiverse because it essentially is moving the goalposts.
Yeah,
again,
because
that's the evolutionist answer to everything.
The problem to space,
right? Well, no, that's the evolutionist answer to everything. Is that that couldn't happen in millions of years? Well, then it must be billions of years.
Yeah,
and then they just keep moving and moving and moving the goalposts, and now it's like, well, this could never happen in a universe in billions and billions of
Yes.
years. Well, if you had multiple universes, there's
infinite number of universes.
you could essentially roll the dice with all those infinite number of universes and end up with what we have now. It's just moving the goalposts. It's a rescuing device is what it is. But all that to say, in the discussion of aliens, and I think you were on the right track with it, was that God has a redemptive plan that we know of from Scripture, and that is revealed truth that is incontrovertible, that God has provided a means of salvation for mankind. But then you say, well, if there was intelligent life that had a soul somewhere else in the universe, it would be affected by the curse as well. So it would need redemption as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And the question is, do we have the kind of God that is gracious enough to redeem any soulish being because he is all-loving, right? If there was some being somewhere on Mars who was affected by the curse, who had a soul, and God gave no opportunity for redemption at all, is that the kind of God that we serve?
No.
I don't think so either.
It goes against his very character.
And I know someone could probably rebuttal and say, well, God is not obligated to provide a means of redemption. But yet, how can we at the same time preach he is all-loving and not?
Yeah, he is obligated because of what
By
he
his
says
own-
about himself.
Yeah, by his own character. Yeah, I could say that. I don't know that we could say we have obligated him because of our sinful
Yeah.
existence. But has he obligated himself? Yeah, I think there's a good argument to be made for that. But that's why I agree with you, is that if there was life somewhere else in the solar system, in the universe, what have you, it's not going to be intelligent life. Bacteria, maybe bugs of some kind, small critters, who knows?
Yeah.
I'm just guessing. But I don't think it could be a being made in God's image, a being with a soul at all.
Correct. 100% with you on that one.
I was sitting here as we were talking, looking up my article I wrote on this. This would have been February of 2018. I put an article on my blog about this, and that was one of the things that I covered. I'll link that in the show notes if anyone's interested. Forgive the shameless plug. But
No, you should. I mean, I'm a firm believer Christians should follow these things. One, because it's fascinating that no matter how hard you try to get away from God, the more it points towards him. And, we could talk about faith, being the evidence of things not seen. And by faith, we see that the world was created with, things we can't see but which do appear, stuff like that. But it's like, the more we look into those things, the more technology advances. So we could, study the genetic makeup of things, even the makeup of DNA itself. And it just keeps pointing back towards a creator and intelligent design. It's truly fascinating, and it's exciting.
Sure.
It's exciting as a Christian to be like,
right.
God is logical.
And I don't. So we don't have to hang on to this one long, because I don't intend for this podcast to get too political. But if neither one of us believes in aliens, being responsible for the alleged sightings and alleged testimony of these whistleblowers in Congress, why are they? I mean, are they credible?
So,
Or is there another reason?
my philosophy is, and this is coming from the Rocket City, they are constantly testing new things that are very, very, very secretive. The amount of non-conversations I have with people in my church.
Non-conversations?
One of the things that people always ask, you don't ask what people do for work. You ask why they're there. You ask for a general topic.
Really?
What kind of engineer are you?
Is that because people have classified work?
Yeah,
that
they're
doing?
all classified. And I had the opportunity to tour the FBI is coming to Huntsville. I had the opportunity to tour.
Is that a done deal now? They're coming?
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay.
They're there.
That's probably a good thing.
It is. It's awesome. And I had an opportunity to tour the building. There were some things they asked me not to talk about. I'm pretty sure it's okay. They didn't show us anything super classified, but
Okay.
most of these people work in rooms. No electronics. You go in, you put your phone in a box. They'll have a little charger for you, so you don't, you can charge your phone while you're in there. Anything that happens in that room is classified. And, for the most part...
And you got to go in there?
I got to see the outside of the room.
Okay, I see.
And, when the door opens, flashing red light, nobody talks while that door is open until it shuts, the lights go off.
Whoa.
And then most of these guys are in bunkers, deep underground. There's a lot of really secretive stuff.
Okay.
And the general rule is, by the time we see it, it's been around for 10 years. The technology that you see is 10 years old.
Interesting.
So there's constantly...
So if I'm going where you're tracking, you suspect that some of what these whistleblowers are alleging might be U.S. technology that isn't public yet?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
And like I said, the more I learn about technology, let's say, so the FBI ballistics lab is down here. None of that's classified. Hollow points, all these things that they, we get to carry, right?
Yeah.
What they're developing for the military, once again, this is not classified, is essentially laser-guided bullets. And this is, we're probably not too far from it. They're currently testing these things where you could shoot someone from 3 miles away with a projectile that'll pop out little wings and essentially be laser-guided. And I mean, the stuff that they're handing out to the military now is, I enjoy shooting, and, you take into account windage, all your ballistics and all these things. It's math, and it's hard. That's why it's difficult to be a sniper. Nowadays, with the technology we have, the scope does all the science for you, does all the math for you. Point and shoot. Can you pull a trigger? Yep, you're good.
Reaching out and touching somebody is easier than ever.
Yeah, so you think about what's available to me as a civilian. Things that are flying around that's not available to me, I don't know about.
I see. So then, what do you do with the testimony about, this guy who's saying there were biologics was the word that he used involved, meaning I think he's implying that there was biological material that they found in some sort of downed aircraft. I'll give you my personal thoughts on it, and then maybe you can tell me if you agree with it or not. I don't trust any of it, honestly. Yeah. I think there's a lot of heat on some of our politicians right now. Again, I don't want this to get too political, but I just want to say, Christians, don't be distracted by the whole alien controversy thing right now. I think it's all bogus, personally, and it's a distraction to take attention off of, those who should be going to jail right now.
And that's a pretty well-known fact, and I can tell you confidently, people in my church all the time, don't believe anything you read in the news. Yeah. Everything that's going on in Ukraine, they're like, do not believe anything. They're like, we don't care where it comes from. And they're like, we're not allowed to talk about it. And they're like, all we can say is, do not believe anything. What's happening in Afghanistan. They're like, man. And it's depressing because a lot of them know things that I don't know. And I have to trust them to say, okay, don't eat this up. And they can't tell me why. And it's really annoying because I know they want to say it's so bad, but they would lose their jobs and their security clearance and all the other things that earn them an income. Right. But when it comes to things like this, it's clearly a distraction from things that are far more important. And we have a guy who just moved down from the Pentagon, and he's one of the guys put on the front of his office, alien autopsy room. Because you could do whatever you want with your office, and he's he's like, trust me, if we had found aliens, we'd be bragging about it to somebody. Right. There'd be no whistleblower involved.
Sure. Well, I mean, the government being as good at things as it is, if there were such things as aliens for the last, 80 years, and that it's still a secret, that has to be the biggest miracle ever. Anyway, we got time for maybe one more question, and that one might lead into the after show. I can't remember if I sent you this one or not. This one is about Seventh-day Adventists. Yes. Okay. Seventh-day Adventists are infamous for their return to the Old Testament law and their obedience and not understanding the purpose of and fulfillment of the law through Christ. This is from Pastor James McGowan here, one of our listeners. He says, but this led to another question. And see if you can make the same connection he's making here in the question. We teach that the Sabbath doesn't have to be obeyed, even though it precedes the Mosaic law. Why then do we teach tithing not as part of the Mosaic law, since it predates the law? I hope I'm making the parallel clear. It may be my own perception, but we seem to teach against the keeping of the Sabbath because it's part of the Old Testament law. Should we preach tithing as obedience or as a general principle or example of giving and for the New Testament saint? Question real quick. He says here we teach that the Sabbath doesn't have to be obeyed, though it precedes the Mosaic law. Does it?
I think he's making the point of a day of rest, which was instituted at creation. That's how I read that.
Okay.
Not necessarily as the day.
I see what you mean. Okay, yeah, because I think we should make a distinction that the law regarding the Sabbath is purely Mosaic.
Yes.
However, it was based on the principle, or the illustration, I should say, that on the seventh day God ceased from his creative work.
And I have a follow-up question for you regarding the Sabbath.
Which before we get to that, by the way, James did email me back on this. He wanted to be clear. He's not trying to suggest we should not tithe. He's just wondering, are we being consistent? And I have the same question, really. What are your thoughts?
I firmly believe you should not tithe.
You should not?
Nope. I think tithing is, as he says, Old Testament law, to give a literal 10%.
Okay.
The New Testament example is give abundantly.
Okay.
I think if you like, so for openness, I use the tithe idea as a basic principle. But if you look at the Old Testament and even the Pharisees, what did they give? 10% of all of that, everything that came in, down to the herbs. So that's like you. There
was additional tithes required as well.
Do you have a garden?
I don't know.
Let's say you had a garden. Are you going to take 10% of your tomatoes to your pastor as a part of your tithe? I
don't know. I might.
If we were to really obey the Mosaic law and tithing, that's what we would have done. We would have taken our crops.
Yeah.
And the Pharisees did that. And God said, hey, they weren't wrong in doing that.
Yeah.
The problem was their enforcement of how they enforced it.
Yeah.
Those things. So it is an Old Testament law, but if you look at Paul and the concept of giving in 1 Corinthians 9,
yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, he doesn't, he talks about giving way more than just 10%. So, God loves a cheerful giver. Give what you can.
So, the context there is in the context in 1 Corinthians 9 of how ministry is supported, correct? So if I can play devil's advocate here for a moment, because honestly, I'm not far off from where you are on this. I think, though, the way you said it was like, whoa, maybe a little more sensational than I would say it.
I'm that guy in the tent meeting.
So in 1 Corinthians 9, it's verses 8 through 14, Paul explains how New Testament ministry is supported. The example that he uses of this is the example of how Old Testament priests and the temple were supported with the tithe. And he says in verse 9 of 1 Corinthians 9, even so, those are two very important words, even so hath the Lord ordained that they which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. So, while it may not say, thou shalt tithe in the New Testament church, he gives this Old Testament example of tithing and then says the words, even so, and then immediately goes into New Testament giving.
Yeah.
So I think this is kind of where maybe James is at with his question, where he asks, should we preach tithing as obedience or as a general principle or example of giving for the New Testament saint? I think he has, in a way, answered the question already, that tithing, while we really can't find a command for it in the New Testament, it is a principle Paul uses here in 1 Corinthians 9 to illustrate how a church should be supported. And then add to that what you said about the idea of abundant giving, which could even go above the tithe. I think now we're talking good principles.
Yes. And I really we talk about the law, and let's say the law regarding adultery, and what did Jesus say about that? if a man even looks at another woman and lusts after he's committed adultery. So he's taken the law and he takes it...
Internalized it.
Yeah, internalizes it. And in our heads, he takes it even further.
Right, which is more strict?
Yeah.
The original law or what Jesus said? Well, obviously it's what Jesus said.
Like, because I think, you're not a murderer, but you hate your brother.
Right.
Uh-oh.
That's a good correlation because, if we try to make a law out of tithing, then it does, in a sense, create a mechanism by which we can feel like we're obeying when maybe our heart isn't really there.
Yes.
And I think that's why the general principle of tithing, Paul uses that. And then additionally, it's the idea of abundant giving out of even deep poverty, as was said of them, which is a grace. He talks about it being a grace, which to me means that God enabled these people to give in a way that was not normal or even sane by some people's standards. Yeah. That's a grace given by God. So I think we're dealing with principles here, not commands. Can we say definitively tithing is a command in the New Testament? That's hard to.
Yeah.
But should a Christian be tithing?
See, I don't teach.
That's maybe the wrong question.
Yeah, I don't teach tithing. Like, I never say you should tithe.
Yeah.
But I do say you should give, and you should give
abundantly
and cheerfully.
But see, okay, so I wouldn't use the phrase a Christian shouldn't tithe. So like the phrase we began with, when you said that, I was like, where is he going with this? I would maybe not say that because I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think the heart needs to be involved. God does love a cheerful giver, and he does love giving people the grace to give beyond their means if they're willing to be that kind of giver.
Yes.
That I think puts the heart back into giving.
Yeah.
Where it should be.
I should also clarify, James, he has his own local church.
Yeah.
James has his own local church. I have my own local church. My people understand me.
Yeah.
So if I get up in front of them and I say, I don't want you guys to tithe, they'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Sure.
They're like,
that's fair.
He's about to come up with something else.
That's fair. Well, that's what I think. There needs to be wisdom in each shepherd to know what kind of flock they're dealing with and how they would say things there. I think that's fair. Anyway, there's probably more we could say on that. We've got to move into the after show now. That 46 minutes just flew by.
Yes, it did.
We jumped over a lot of different things there. Listener, if you appreciated this content and you're not a patron of the podcast, this is kind of where it stops for you at the moment until the next public episode comes out. Ethan and I are going to go talk on the after show now. That is bonus content for elite patrons. If you'd like to become one of those, that is patreon.com/reasontogether. If you'd like to just continue listening for free, I'm thankful for that too. We appreciate all of you who do listen and those who send in questions as well. Thank you to all of you who sent in questions for this episode. We appreciate that. Anyway, Ethan and I are going to go now over the after show. We are encouraging balance, developing perspective, and connecting faith to practice. This is Reason Together.